Okay, here we have another boardroom breakdown. This is number 3 in our series, and I would say to go through these in order. This is a nice prerequisite to where we are here, actually taking action and talking a little bit more to flesh out what happens, what this means truly optimally in the postseason, which I consider right after the full season is over. If you have a more clear delineation, like I know a lot of things get fuzzy, get gray for people, and this can happen in a micro. And another point to make, what I have found effective, especially as an aging athlete, as a someone who has other lifestyle, my training doesn't always, my life revolves around my training around life. It's more training around life nowadays. So this can work well in a more micro dose, meaning like a month training block, or maybe a little bit more than that, 2 to 3 months. So for example, I might take a little shorter off season if I'm going to be competing, say in March of next year. It's right now, it's kind of heading into December here, 2024. So for example, if I was going to be competing in the past, I have competed really early in the season, as in like January and things like that. And you may just have to run through some of these other areas and be willing to kind of shortchange yourself. But I would be wary if you want to have longevity in the sport and move well, be well, have a healthy, happy life, be able to play with your grandkids, and have that robust balance of all these areas, which we'll get into here in a second. But this is what the areas look like. And I like, this is an old school video game that I played for reference. It's called Off-Road, and there's a bunch of games that are like that. If you've ever heard of that game or remember it, it had all these different things you can buy when you go in to the shop after a race. Like you win a race and you get $2,000. How do you want to spend your money, which is equivalent to us as humans? How much energy, how much does our battery have to put into these different areas, or put into, say we're training for Highland Games, we're doing a body recomposition, and we want to do a powerlifting meet or some other things. How much energy and time do we have to put into this? What are our constraints as far as this, like recovery and these other areas are too? So again, back to the game is how we want to use that, and the best winner of these races would be somebody who buys not just the engine, or not just upgrades the suspension or the tires. It's the person, eventually you want to up all those areas, and you have a little room. I've used the example, for example, of this strength. That's one of our areas on this continuum, and that's the bullet that most people tend to shoot at, or the target that people tend to shoot at, use their bullets for that topic. From what I've found, there are exceptions for sure. Rarely does a Highland Games athlete, or rarely do we probably get into this sport and think, oh, I can't wait to work on all my weak links and my mobility recovery. That's kind of equivalent to eating vegetables, or maybe doing some of those little things, like the car analogy again, to all those different things. And again, the person who's able to build up all those kinds of, if you have a huge engine and you have no brakes, that's not a good scenario. You imagine that, the old muscle cars tended to be like that back in the 60s and 70s, really heavy, poor brakes, and vice versa too. If you never have any acceleration and you have all that suspension, you have to really be perfect. And that's kind of where we come in with the athleticism, or somebody who's very, maybe does need to add some body weight or something too. You're trying to work with perfect technique, all this explosiveness, but you don't have anything behind your throws, or whatever sport activity it may be too. Or somebody who really wants to, the extreme of like running a marathon or doing something, even a 5K for an athlete, they're going to have to work on, or want to be working into, more here. If that's our center point, where they're going to slide way down over here, they're going to need to spend more time. But in general, for any athlete, any sport, use Highland Games as a more example, more of the kind of audience that likes to look at this in my world too. So again, keep in mind this will apply to any athlete anytime in that deeper postseason and off-season. Postseason is more that reflection. Those first 2 videos cover more of this postseason reflection, planning, and really digging into these areas Again, I think people bias way too much towards this end of things, and we want that, again, like that game manager, we want things to be more, at least coming into our preseason or into our season, where we're really nice and balanced, where we have these athletic skills, we built some athletic base, we're able to be explosive, we can run, jump, play, nothing's bothering us. That would fit into like the weak links. Some people are just going to be very broken down. You know, they've spent a lot of time up here, and we need to pull them way down towards here. If they're willing and able, in that second video I shot, are they really in the belief? The belief was over here on this, the ABCDE stuff. If they're not really aware and believing that, then I don't know if I can help them for one thing as a coach, but they may benefit from a coach. But that checkpoints of what's going to be the stuff to do. And mobility, that means different things to different people. That's another topic in itself. I'm happy to flesh that out in future videos here too. People want me to go into that. That is not, to me, just stretching and yoga. I talk a lot about that too. It's working on these neurological patterns, potentially going and seeing a PT, someone with a very athlete, body awareness minded coach and or personal trainer, helping you in that category. That's a big thing that I personally work on. And what are the weak links? Do we even realize what those weak links are and how to train? But your time, your effort in this post-off season time, generally, in my opinion, we're working way more towards this side of things. We're biasing way over here. And then that's where we can kind of play into both of those areas. To me, in the true pure sense, in looking at the if we're truly talking about an elite athlete that has a true defined season, usually a season, right, for most athletes is less than 6 months for sure, and sometimes even shorter, like truly competitive time. So they're able to spend more time, and maybe I recommend a lot of time in a pure sense, or I used to do this more very true to the model, because I didn't compete, I didn't have the means, or there wasn't as many competitions available, and I knew I needed to spend more time in here. Having injuries, having low back and shoulder issues, I needed more of that. I felt better, I needed to check in. Also, like, health would fit, probably more, overall health. Imagine that. Am I checking in with my health? How's my blood pressure? Did I get my labs done? The health side of things versus that strength, athleticism, skill, on the field time way up over in here. Some people, I see that more and more, unfortunately, they want to go right back in here after 2 or 3 weeks. And ideally, it is way down here. Maybe even no, I used to just not even go into the gym, or maybe honestly, I would go in and train just to have one day a week. I'd get in the gym and I'd train arms or something very bodybuilder. No temptation, minimal temptation to like, oh, maybe I should just see where I'm at, that see where I'm at kind of attitude with the, it's like the F around and find out almost. It's really bright up in there. That's more, again, in this skill, athletic, hot zones. Oh, I know it's been a month since I've touched my bench press or my squat, whatever it is. Let's just go see where I am, where I'm at. Why? Does that even fit into this? Anything to do with the goal, keeping the goal in the off season? Stay away from that. Trust the process. Trust me that will be better in the long run, to almost forget everything you know about the gym and on the throwing field, so you're that mentally refreshed. Mental refresher time could be even off the chart over here in some other area. How ready are we? How almost anxious are ready to explode in and be grateful and be fresh in that. And we've spent a lot of this time reflecting, having this forethought. What do we want for our season to come? What went well, what didn't go? Again, in that first video I did with that. So going back to that and pushing on all those areas, having some support along these areas. But again, more people over here, 2 to 3 months away would be ideal in most cases for an overall longevity, even overall performance. I would err towards a shorter in season. We spread out, we do too many games, in my opinion, my experience. Games are time, money, effort. We're not developing these other skills if we go right in and we compete, or we have a really long season. Again, if you have a longer break, you can start to work more into these areas, but if we want to talk percentages, again, hone in more deep off season, we want so much of that. And then as we're getting in, ideally say around the first of the year, let's say we don't have a competition until May or June, ideally. I know different parts of the country kind of has to flip that, but we want to spend a good couple months really focusing towards these areas. Doesn't mean we can't have anything, that these can't work together in these categories, if that makes sense. And then again, I didn't really touch on this. As we're going out, I like that athleticism, skill, power, training for power, getting lighter on our feet, just some explosive little foot hops, jumping rope, that could fit in, more of the athleticism into the conditioning. They can blend. It doesn't mean they can't play nicely. I'm happy to break these down if people have specific questions, want to add some comments. I can flesh this out for you individually. It's just talking more general. And again, these words, I think people know what strong is overall, or what they deem strong. They don't necessarily know what athletic, and my definition of that is that expression of movement in all different planes, especially when we talk about the highest end, running, or basically sprinting, jumping, throwing, just having that coordination, that ability to just almost, matrix kind of stuff, download the file and do the thing, or the file's already close enough downloaded and the brain can synthesize, sync that up, and it can figure it out. You haven't done, say, a power skip or something that seems very simple. A lot of people have trouble relearning how to literally get their gait going properly. It's like walking and chewing gum, where they can throw a weight really well, they get so specialized, but they can barely, do a normal gait pattern. Literally, truly, it's crazy to think about. They're struggling with basic human movement, crawling, any crawling patterns, looking at these developmental sequence stuff that we do. We spend time over here. This would be like our OS stuff, our original strength tools. That's the rocking, rolling, movement patterns with head nods, the breath, all these developmental sequence models, the baby type of movements. That's where that fits into here nicely. Again, more the true conditioning. Talk about that for a second. Conditioning to me means using tools, not just sitting slogging away on a treadmill, thankfully, or sitting on a bike and doing hours and hours of boring treadmill running. I think people are recognizing, especially if you're a heavyweight athlete, not going to be the best tool, but this is where movements that can fill a few different cups a little bit too. There's a lot of great stuff from Strong First, from different tools that I've used with kettlebell training, using the Strong First model, this anti-glycolytic training. So having longer rests and strategic intervals, timed intervals, really listening to our body, not hitting the hot zone of these, feeling the burn so much, these really long sets, these poorly done conditioning things. I hate to knock on CrossFit, but typical CrossFit programming, way too much skill mixed in with strength, mixed in with conditioning. I don't think it fits as well. I highly regard movements like rucking, and I consider rucking just putting a pack on and not going too fast, keeping that in the under 4 mile an hour zone, where you're able to walk smoothly and well with, say, starting about 10% of your body weight, just as a indicator. That doing those, sometimes people, it's just going for walks, going for longer walks like after meals, or doing a couple longer walks per week. That can be enough to help the heart health, of course, help the blood pressure. Are you in a healthier zone, especially in the off season? I never give this up personally myself. I keep that conditioning, partly because I'm a body weight athlete. I need to stay within that range. That gets a little harder if I push into the gym strength or try to bulk up and things like that too. Conditioning, body composition, put that body fat, body comp, check in, and now is the time to fix that. Otherwise, during the season, and I've fallen into that too, I try to work on one, get a little greedy, have another competition, or work on something that may not fit, may not play as nicely, and I run out of bandwidth. I drain that battery. I kind of play in too many hot zones too. So keeping the goal, one primary goal, like we talked about in that first boardroom breakdown number 1, it's talking about that as well. So keep those in mind. Again, mobility is a little harder to break down in one area. This original strength stuff is a great place to start. There's a bunch of videos on that. This athleticism skill, everything from in the gym, that's where it kind of blends into this area. Working on body weight training. It could be even things like pull-ups, different body weight skills that I've done over the years. There's some old videos on that. Working into, I like to do stuff on the parallettes where you're doing like an L-sit, just working through body weight. That can be a nice segue and maybe way to stay sane too. I've done that effectively in the off season. I've done a lot of conditioning. Again, specific programs like Simple and Sinister. There's a newer one called Kettlebell Axe. It's a great option for throwers. Working in, maybe somebody else is missing something else. Maybe there's an older athlete who comes from a more conditioning background, a little less common, but let's use that for example. Maybe they're already really mobile, so they do get to spend a little more time. They've done that work, and maybe they're not as experienced in the Highland Games. And that's also skills on the field would count as that. They're doing more throwing, where again, I didn't really touch on that, but the true person that's been worn down and training really, really hard, already strong, they're gonna benefit from at least minimum of a good month of all or very high amount of this. The gym stuff is working towards other new skills or areas. You know, if they're used to doing a lot of bench pressing, barbell pressing, it would be working on things like push-ups, working on things that are very minimal on the demand, like not towards max effort. Different types of body angles. Maybe it's a Hindu or a dive bomb push-up where you're pushing at all these different angles. Or talking about my parallettes, I'm working on parallettes, being strong, going from an L sit to a hand all the way into a handstand. That's athletic. That fits more in the movement quality and the weak link stuff. It can kind of fit into all that potentially too. So that's somewhat individual. Hard to flesh out every little detail in that too, but I hope that gives you guys a little bit more clarity, or maybe a lot more clarity on our best use of our time. Again, just to recap that, way more towards this for the majority of people. Check in and be aware, again, back to the other two videos. Do we have that awareness and the direction, the target of what our issues are? Do we have some resources around us? Or are we just kind of guessing? If we're not assessing, we're guessing. We like to say that too. So that's where the coach comes in. That's where we need to know clearly what the target we're aiming at and all the variables we can, and go back. You can always take a break, step back for the day, the week, whatever, especially if you're hitting already some weak links as far as you're starting into your strength stuff and you were already having, say, more low back pain or a hip, a previous injury, something, you're not really checking in, you're not really tending to that. We may need to readjust, take a longer period of time, and that's just a very minimal. I've had plenty of injuries that have really truly taken more like a year to recover. Doesn't mean I exclusively can't do this stuff, but I have to really manage those things and spend more time and energy there. It's not going to help me short term as much in the performance, but that's that delayed gratification, those adult decisions, especially as we age as an athlete, and the more towards wanting to be healthy. If we're doing these things way over here, we're not healthy. We're maybe fit, we may be performing at a high level, but we're not on the health side of things, and we're truly not. If we're 400 pounds or if we're 350 pounds and we bench press 500 pounds and we can't run a mile, because we're so broken down, we can't even run the mile, we can't move, this is a fact too, this has been studied. If our VO2 max sucks, we're not going to live long. It's very unlikely that this person's going to live to be 80 years old or 80 years old and living well. That person, I would have a strong concern that they're going to live well or live at all past their 60s. That's just the fact. We see that with strength athletes all the time. They keep pushing into that, and I truly believe that going back into this more allows us a very high return on investment, a long-term balance of, again, that off-road video game analogy, or any of those video games, those power meters, somebody has all those different skills. That's ideal, rather than just a superpower or souping up the engine. Let's put more horsepower into it. That's the gym, rather than the suspension and the tuning, or just the driver, the quality of my driving ability, rather than that. Sometimes trade in the whole vehicle and get a reset on this, step way back. And that's where this deep time too can allow us a chance to really step back and say, what do I really want to do? Or is this still fitting me? Does the Highland Games, does the sport, dare I say that I do that and half jokingly say I'm retiring every year, and I really mean that. Give myself a time to say, hey, if you want to quit, now's your time. If you want to reset and do something else, if something else lights you up a lot more, and that's okay to take that and really reflect on it. Highly recommend journaling, getting in a group of like-minded people, having one specific coach that's writing your programming, giving you feedback. You can have other resources around you, but the one head coach is your primary target with where we're going, specifically with these areas or those other pieces. If we have too many coaches working in too many different, it's kind of like cooks in the kitchen, chefs in the kitchen. We don't know what's gonna turn out or how that meal is gonna come together. That's what this comes down to. So let me know how that goes, guys. Any questions specifically, please put in the comments or message. You can message me, email me there too, and let's keep this going.